Okay, just a term as well, maybe just to get you familiar with it before I begin. I will use the term backwater station, which is essentially used for an organisation when they refer to where they place their staff that they do not appreciate so much. It will make sense in the context, hopefully, because I see some startled faces there at that expression. We'll see. I'm sure it'll be fun. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak to you this evening about Vladimir Putin. We have heard this name a lot in the press recently, and why is it that this man is so prominent? How is it that he gained such power? How is it that a former Soviet spy has rose to the highest office in Russia? Vladimir Putin has been the president of Russia for 14 years, and based on the latest election results, he will now remain president, should he stay in office, for 20 years in total, at least, at the end of his next term. He is currently the second longest reigning leader in modern Russia, second only to the former dictator Joseph Stalin. Vladimir became president in the year 2000, and although he took a little break from 2008 to 2012, many people believe that while he was prime minister during this time, he was still pulling the strings in Russia. So now we're going to look at how Mr. Putin actually rose to power, and we're going to look at his ambitions for the future of his beloved Russia. Vladimir Putin was born in 1952 in what was then known as Leningrad, which is today's St. Petersburg in Russia. Vladimir experienced a very unhappy childhood. His two brothers died at a young age from illnesses, and Vladimir grew up in a very small apartment, which he shared with 6 other people. His mother was a factory worker, and his father was a conscript in the Soviet Navy. Vladimir, as a child, had large aspirations. He really wanted to become an intelligence officer, a spy for the Soviet Union. He was reportedly, however, too impulsive and too undisciplined. Vladimir, in an attempt to change his behaviour and how he was perceived by people, decided to change, and he devoted himself to his studies and to extracurricular activities, notably the martial arts. Before Vladimir finished school, he went to speak with the KGB in Russia, in the former Soviet Union. He spoke with a senior agent, asking how he could actually become a senior agent himself, how he could join the KGB. The agent advised him to either join the military or to study law. And Vladimir did just that. He decided to study law and enrolled in the Leningrad State University. Vladimir reinvented himself. He now was known for being extremely disciplined and hard-working. So much so that he was actually headhunted by the KGB just before he finished university in the 4th of his 5-year course. He was recruited for a probationary period, after which he became an agent for the KGB at the very ripe age of just 22 years old. Vladimir was eventually sent to Dresden in eastern Germany, which was known as a backwater station. Many KGB agents believed that the worst of the bunch were sent to Dresden to just keep them busy, so they wouldn't be involved in anything too important. This really flies in the face of Vladimir's claims to have been a super spy for the Soviet Union back in his youth. Reportedly, what would have been incumbent upon this group in Dresden would have just been to collect newspaper clippings, and nothing too important. Vladimir swears that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, that he wasn't responsible for the destruction of much intelligence, lest it fall into the hands of the Allies. Whether or not this is true is yet to be seen. Whatever his history with the KGB, we do know that it had a profound influence on his life, and most notably on his political career. This is as much in terms of strategy as in execution. Vladimir famously once said in an interview that very few people truly understand the destruction that took place at the end of the 1980s, when the Communist Party failed to modernize the Soviet Union. The breakup of the USSR had a profound impact on Vladimir Putin and very much influenced his decision to enter politics. After leaving Dresden and returning to Russia, Vladimir Putin started working at the mayor's office at what was then St. Petersburg. After a period working at this mayor's office, he made his way to Moscow and worked hard to become a public figure. His work was indeed successful, so much to the point where Boris Yeltsin, the former president of Russia, noticed the young Putin and was very impressed by him. He recruited him for his staff in 1997. He went so far as to make him the director of the FSB in 1998. The FSB is essentially the KGB's post-Soviet successor. Its duties are to maintain national security, counter-terrorism, and surveillance. Major shifts on the world stage helped Vladimir Putin's formation of his political objectives. Vladimir Putin wanted to fix Russia. He wanted it to become a superpower on the world stage. At that time, Russia was still a very much an influential player, more so than it is today. In 1999, Boris Yeltsin announced that he would like Putin to become his successor. And he appointed him acting prime minister in this year, 1999. He then appointed him to acting president, and this led Putin to taking over the power of the country after his surprise resignation in 1999, after Mr. Yeltsin's surprise resignation in 1999. This led the way for Mr. Putin to actually bring Russia into the 20th century as its new leader. Although he was acting president, he cemented his status after an election months into the year 2000. During his first years of his presidency, the world took notice as to how much the breakup of the USSR actually influenced the young Putin's political agenda. Objectively, it is true that the disintegration of the Soviet Union indeed led to what was a rough transition for many of the former republics. Vladimir Putin had a very clear goal. He wanted Russia to be as powerful as the United States. Vladimir Putin needed to consolidate his power in order to try and achieve this goal, which is something he did. And Russia became increasingly authoritarian as a result. Nowadays, Russia has limitations on freedom of speech, on the media, and Putin regularly arrests his political opponents and journalists, sometimes putting them to death. Mr. Putin sees the cozying up of former Soviet states, such as Estonia or Ukraine, to the European Union as a major threat to Russia's standing on the global stage. Mr. Putin sees these as former territories that belong to Russia and not the West. In 2008, Mr. Putin decided to act on this, and he tried to annex the breakaway regions of Georgia. These regions had a very high amount of Russians living in them, or people who identify as Russians living in them. On that occasion, however, the French stood up and they organized a ceasefire, which dictated that most Russian military had to actually leave Georgia. The situation in Crimea, years later, was much different. In 2014, Russia successfully annexed Crimea from Ukraine. And they started this invasion on March 18th. Significantly, Mr. Putin chose March 18th for the first round of the presidential elections this year. This is a testament to how successful this operation was seen at home. So, coming to the end, what now with Mr. Putin? What is he doing? Well, as we mentioned, he wants to see Russia become a new superpower. He wants to see them on an equal power with the United States and the European Union. He despises any Western influence in his country. Indeed, the word Western is referred to as a dirty word by many in Russian politics. Mr. Putin has been re-elected, and he changed it during his last term to ensure that the presidential terms will now be for 6 years' duration and not 4 like they were previously. This means that if he stays in office, Mr. Putin will be reigning until at least 2024, and at which age he will be 71. Mr. Putin is someone to watch, and we need to be wary of his actions. It is claimed that he had a direct influence on the last American election, helping Donald Trump to get into office. It is also claimed that he had a significant influence on the result from the Brexit vote referendum in the United Kingdom. He is now engaging in talks with Venezuela, Libya, and the Middle East. Venezuela, notably, is, I think, the most oil-rich country in the world, if not one of them. And Libya and the Middle East are strategic global players. Mr. Putin, it has been said, wants to step in where the Trump administration are stepping out. The recent attack on a former Russian spy and his daughter in Salisbury in the United Kingdom saw a display of solidarity from Western nations towards Mr. Putin. What will actually come of this display of solidarity remains to be seen. Thank you.